This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 428 of the Dressage Radio Show on the Horse Radio Network, brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products and Total Saddle Fit. Today, we're going to continue our discussion with Hillary Moore-Hebert about young horses. Angela Jackson and Rebekah Mingari are with us from the North American Young Rider Championships and to talk about their long-standing relationship as trainer and rider. And we're going to answer some follow-up questions to a previous Total Saddle Fit tip of the week. This is Reese Koffler-Stanfield from Georgetown, Kentucky.
And this is Philip Parks from Rockville, and you're listening to the Dressage Radio Show. Nice job on the intro there, Reese.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, we're having some technical problems with Phil tonight, so I took his role. I prefer to give it to him, but we're glad to be here with you guys, and it's been a big week, huh, Phil, in the news?
It's been very busy. Well, it's been a couple of weeks since we've been on the show, so.
That's right. That's right.
You know, some big stuff happening in Germany. We want to congratulate Laura Graves and her horse Verdatus on winning the Aachen Grand Prix Special on her 30th birthday, leading the USA to Nations Cup silver in Aachen, right behind Germany, which is, I think, always gold in Aachen. That's their home ground. They love to win there. But, I mean, that's a huge deal for Laura to kind of beat Olympic gold medalist, Omaha world champion, title winner Isabel Worth and her horse Weigold. So I think that was, congratulations USA. You're up there, you're contending, and you're in silver there at that show.
That was huge. And Laura moved to number 2 in the world ranking list, and that's been the highest an American has been. Oh, I read it, and I don't have it written down, but in a very long time. So that is so exciting for Laura, and we're so proud of her. And she's such a huge supporter of our show, so we're sending it back to her. So that was really great. And also, I mean, great scores coming out of that show for the U.S. team. Adrienne Lyle, that was her, one of her first. I think it was our third CDI with her stallion, and they were 73.608. Olivia Lagoy-Welts on the Lenoir finished 12th with a 72.118. Congrats to her. That's a heck of a score. Casey Perry-Glass on Dublé also was a 71.6. So as you guys know,
all riders over 70% for the American team now.
That's huge. And all those riders are good supporters of us here on the show. So we're so happy for them and really proud of their experience in Europe. So looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that. But Phil, we're going to continue. We had a great discussion going with Hillary Moore-Hebert on our last show, and we're going to finish that discussion up about young horses. So we hope you guys enjoy our discussion. Well, tonight we are so happy for part 2 for Philip, part 2 for the Americans. Hillary Moore-Hebert, contributing editor for Dressage Today, is back on to finish our conversation about young horses. Hillary, welcome back.
Hi, everyone.
Well, you're going to start us off right from where we ended last week. So go for it.
Yes. So the next question I had, because we were talking about young horses and sort of the stages of how to get them into a program where they could be doing dressage in some way or another, is if you were to, under the guidance of professionals, get a young horse and then have it be that they, lived out their young months and everything. I guess the first question is, what is sort of the standard for putting them under saddle, and just in terms of like a timeline, and when to start that and how long to do it for, and then how long should you expect that to last? So when would they be really suitable for a skilled rider that's comfortable with, a greener horse under saddle?
Okay. Well, I can tell you kind of exactly, how we do it at the farm where I work at, and it works pretty good. So normally in the fall of their 2-year-old year, we bring them in and get them introduced to the idea just of the the schedule of things, sort of thing. So we bring them in, we brush them, we do their feed, and then that's where we may put a saddle on and free run them, or depending on the balance, the size, of the horse, how developed they are, maybe a little bit of lunging, and that would be like maximum 3 days a week. That would go on for maybe 6 weeks at the most, and then because our winters are pretty brutal, then they go back out, and then they come in their the spring of the 3-year-old year, and then that's when they would, everything gets reintroduced again as if it were new, and then that's where we start the backing process with more lunging, maybe 4 or 5 days in a row, depending on the horse, depending how the development is going, and then so I just think about it as in. So 2-year-old year, we want them to sort of just be used to being handled and maybe a saddle, maybe a bridle on, that they're comfortable with that. The 3-year-old year, then all of that plus by the end of, the fall of that year, of their 3-year-old year, they're comfortable with a rider on their back and a little bit of steering and going around the arena free from the lunge lines. So, and then at the end of that year, they go out again, and then in their spring of their 4-year-old year, then they learn more riding, of some figures, circles, turns, walk, trot, canter, to be able to be ridden in their 4-year-old year in a training level test. That's when we take them out to do their first show. If they're prepared and if they're ready, that's kind of the goal. And then from there, I think, they get ridden through the winter at that point. And again, maybe 3-4 days in a row, to a total of maybe 5 days a week or something like that. And then by then they're ready to be. So that's usually, I'm doing kind of the 4-year-old stuff. I have somebody else at the farm do the up to that point, because I like them to be a little bit safe when I get on, and that rider is, I use eventing rider, brave riders that will take them to the first show, because I'm really getting way less brave in my older age. And then at that point, 4 years old, 5 years old, then the owner starts to get on at kind of at the end of that year to kind of learn that horse and, get acquainted with him. And then the owner could show him in their 5-year-old year, or maybe I would take one more year to get the horse ready for an amateur rider. So that's kind of our program. And I think it's worked really, really well for us. Not always do we do the 2-year-old stuff. Sometimes the horses are like the really big horses take an extra year. We can delay it for sure, but that's kind of a general guideline in how it goes, and throughout each year. And I think that's every horse is an individual, but we try our best with that program.
Yeah, I think that's very similar to what we did with my horses when I had a breeding program. I'm even less brave than Phil. Phil undersold himself. He is very brave, and Phil has done all of these steps. I am even less brave, and I think we talked about this when we were doing our segment last time, and that is, it's okay to say, hey, this isn't my thing. I mean, I really, really like to ride more advanced horses. 3rd level and above, I'm your girl. I don't really love it before then. That's not, it's just not my thing. I've not done a ton of it in my career. I've done it. I have taken 4 and 5-year-olds myself. That's when I like to get them. For me, they have to be able to go to their first show. That's sort of like when I'm like, okay, Big Mama's ready. Before that, I'm like, Phil, I have a very, very good team that I send them to. I would do all the groundwork at my farm. I have, the mounted police from Lexington would come out, and they would teach them all sort of ground manners, and we would do the grooming and that kind of thing. But then they would go out to the arena and do mounted police work and walk through over tarps and all kinds of stuff, get ropes between their legs. And that needs to be done with somebody who's very confident with that. Again, not really what I do. And so they would spend some time with them. And then I would send mine to a very good event friend of mine, team CEO eventing. And they had a fantastic team that would take it them from pretty much like, I would usually send them of their 3-year-old year. I would send them because they already knew how to wear a saddle and a bridle and that kind of stuff. So I personally would also pay to send them to someone that's all they do. They do it all day long with babies and youngsters, and they do a fantastic job. And then I would get them back at the end of their 3-year-old turning 4-year-old year, and they're ready to rock and roll. So that's what I did. My team, at the event riders, oh my goodness, they would take them out and they would, walk them over stuff and, put them on the trailer and all of that stuff. So that's what I do. Hillary, what do you do?
Well, so it's interesting because as much as I used to do young horses more a long time ago, but I got more into, as you were talking about, Reese, the older horses. And I don't know if the listeners or you guys know, some of the FEI horses that I've taken out in the past 5 or 6 years were really, really tricky. Like I got the ride on them because nobody else really could ride them. So, which, the joy of looking at centerline scores, if you pull it up, it's really easy to track because you see horses I have that I would like to imagine that they did better under me if competing at all. But my point to that and what it has to do with young horses is twofold. The first is, the thing that I have always believed, and I don't know if you guys agree, but if you don't start the horses properly, you're going to create issues that will exist forever. And I have always felt that if you have a horse that learns to get away with stuff or is allowed to get away with stuff because they intimidate the rider, then even if it seems like you fixed it, years later, when you put the pressure on, for example, to try to be moving them up in the FEI work, it seems like it can come back for less skilled riders. And so that's where I have sometimes seen horses that I've ended up getting where they've become unmanageable because they seemed really agreeable for, their less skilled owner. And they would do things like, instead of being in front of the leg, they would just kind of stop. And so it didn't seem like a big deal. But then when you get someone who pushes them through that and they've been allowed to stop for enough years, then it turns into like a rearing problem. And so you can work through it, but it's sad to me because there's some horses that I think to myself, and this is what got me into wanting to get back to the younger horses. I think, if I could have dealt with this in really the same level of risk when that horse was younger and gotten to them at a younger place, it would be interesting to see, what would have come of that if they were never allowed to be like this for 5 or 6 years. So, that's my experience. Like you guys are talking about being brave, is it can have very long-term consequences, I think, to have it if you're fooling yourself and saying, yes, I can take care of this. I think it's much smarter to say, I need someone who can go out and be the leader.
Oh, I think that in any horse sport, I mean, there are people that specialize in different stages, and there is nothing wrong. And I think people like, well, I want to start my horse myself. I completely agree with you. That is a stage that's really important. And there are people out there that do that every day. And I don't do that every day. I maybe do it once a year if I just, it's not my thing. That's not what I specialize in. And I think just stepping back and saying, you know what, this is an investment in my horse. And I think as you get a younger horse, you have to remember you're spending less money at the initial purchase price. At the end of the day, it's all going to cost the same. Does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah. Can you just repeat that for everyone?
So at the beginning, I this horse, everyone's sort of been kind of listening about. Follow Me. We call him Mikey. Same idea, right? This was a younger horse who's been very well started, and I've had no trouble with him, knock on everything, because he had a very good start and then went to a very good place, and then I grabbed him. He's 4, so I've had no trouble with him because he was well started. But this is a stage where a lot of problems can start for a long time. And I always feel like at the end of the day, you're going to spend the same amount of money, no matter what it is. So if you're going to get a younger horse, you have to know you're going to have to, or you breed it, or you get a foal, you're going to have to just say, there is money that's going to have to be spent on training, so that it's the same amount of money, you just have it over time. So I just think as a young horse, you have to know you're going to spend the money. You just have to spend it. You just have to say, okay, in training. Because, if you're not an expert, you haven't done it.
You go look at trained horses, the money that they're worth is due to down to their training. And this is the horse I want because it does second level, and someone's trained at the second level, well, that's where the money goes, right?
Right.
It wasn't necessarily born with that quality. But just returning to Hillary's point, I have had horses that have come up with a problem. Like let's say there's a horse that has a tendency in the beginning to rear a little bit, or a lot. That never necessarily goes away, right? So you make it calm, you ride it, you do your best, you teach it. But sometimes with horses, like whenever you pressure that horse, it returns to that problem. Does that make sense?
Yes. It is a lifelong problem.
Some things are instinctive. I truly believe that it's not necessarily the training. Those types of horses you have to spend a lot of extra time with, and you go slow on them, and you do your best. But there is, maybe it's 1 out of 100 horses, 1 out of 200 horses, something like that, where they're just, they figure something out, right? And like, for instance, I have a horse, one of my own horses. He learned as a young horse that he could break cross ties. Well, I trained him. I had him for so many years, forever. And to this day, he's still alive. He's retired, but to this day, you can put him in cross ties, and some days he'll just decide he wants to leave, and he'll just snap those cross ties. He knows he can do it, and so that's kind of the way it is. I'm not necessarily like, there's a part of the training in there, but there's also just part of like, it's kind of a little bit like his personality just does that thing. So yeah, there's no guarantees, that you have a horse that it's, just a blank slate, and then you just, write your record for the horse's life on it. These little things happen, these little personality quirks, they come with them sometimes. I'm not exactly sure what you do about it. Sometimes you just accept it and you find a way to train that horse. And, to Hillary's point, when you have a beginning and you know that thing about him, then you accept that thing and you find your way early how to deal with that kind of a problem and how to deal with your horse. And then, and then you can train it all the way to wherever you want to go with it. And I can only push this far, and then something is going to happen. Nervous horses are like that, that, I have to be, a little bit careful, but at least you know about it, and at least you know how to deal with it, and you can find trainers and help.
Well, and it doesn't escalate,
they're not all
right?
perfect. Yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't escalate. It doesn't become a huge issue. And it's just a stage in the game where, I always encourage people to, if somebody brings me a 3-year-old, I'm going to call Phil, or I'm going to call my friend Megan and say, hey, this is not my thing. And I'm a professional. So, it's good to say, it's good to know that sort of as you get a young horse. I think it's really important to think, okay, if I'm not really good at breaking, it doesn't mean you can't be there every day. It doesn't mean you can't participate. I have one horse, Denali. I bred him. I was there when he was born. I still have him. The girl that broke him did 30 days on him. And then I took him over, and I felt great on him ever since. Then I had 2 fillies that they were hot tamales. And I was like, no, I don't want them back for a while. And so, you got to be realistic with your skills and know where you're good and where you're not. And there's nothing wrong with that. But as you buy a young horse, it's just really important that you factor that cost in, because there is a cost to sending them to be broken. There is a cost if you do want to have somebody come and do groundwork. There's a cost for that. So I just think it's important to know that and factor that in, and not think you're doing that. So. And
I try and tell people, with the adult amateurs that are, out maybe looking at a 3 or 4 year old horse, and say to me, oh, I can save a little bit of money there, and I can have the horse with training, in training with you for, a year or 2. I'm totally cool with that. That's great. And we agree that's great. But I'm still going to go out and buy the horse that has the best temperament. Mm-hmm. Not get all caught up in, there's lots of fancy bloodlines and, big black totalist horses, and they're not all created equal in temperament either, that to me is the most important thing, because you can train a horse to be more flashy and to build muscle and, do a lot of things, but you can't necessarily change its temperament. You can't change the way that horse thinks and reacts. And so, again, I think this is the most important thing. And when you're buying a foal, bring somebody or know somebody who knows bloodlines and says, that horse creates really good amateur horses, maybe not super flashy, maybe not, but a horse that you're going to end up riding when it's 5 and 6, and then continue riding until it's 15, and you can enjoy the horse for a long time. But I think a lot of people with young horses get caught up in flash and pizzazz and bloodlines, and this is by whatever stallion that's famous at the moment, and this is by Vallegro stallion or whatever, and that's a problem.
A lot of the bloodlines that I'm, as I'm looking, it's amazing to me that as I talk more and more to people who've seen some of the unproven stallions that are trending at the moment, it seems to me like a lot of the stallions that are trendy, when you talk to someone who's seen them, they're like, that's a pretty hot stallion. It'll be interesting what the foal's temperament is before you look. And so it's interesting to me that there's a lot of horses that are showing up quite a bit. And then when you talk to people who've seen the stallion, it's like, they're talking about it in ways that they're saying, really look at the foal's temperament, make sure that it seems suitable for you. So I think it's easier than not to come upon that, especially these days. I don't know, 30 years ago or whatever, but I think it's very easy now to get a horse that has bloodlines that are very recognizable, but can be a very hot horse.
Yeah. And that's pretty widely known now, right? That's pretty widely known.
All the horses in the top shows, and those are ridden by professional riders who need a certain quality to get the top scores in the world. They need to be super flashy. They need to be a little bit hot, and that's not necessarily a horse that's going to be for everyone. Yeah. And so
I think you have to remember too, what's the end game? If you buy a young horse, what is your end game? My end game is I would like a top sport horse, but as I get older, I would also like to not own a killer. You know what I mean? I don't want to go to a horse show and be worried that my little, horse is a beast. I mean, some temperament is fine, but you have to really find a horse that has a good character, and that's coming from 3 professional riders. And if it is a killer and you can't walk it around the arena when you look at it, it's going to take a long time to get it there and think what you want to do.
If ever. I've had more experience with horses, hot horses, that you look at them and you say, wow, that's an FEI horse, and never make it because you can't train them. You can't get them in the trailer. They got to get in the trailer. Well, they just won't accept the daily training. That's the most important thing in our sport. We have to, especially if the horse and rider are learning together a little bit too, it's a repetition. You need a horse that's smart enough to learn, but not smart enough to take over and try and do things himself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think,
and in the end, like if the trot's not a 10, who cares? If it's fun to ride and you can show St. George and whatever, I think that's where people get caught up, and it makes me frustrated. It's more fun.
Yeah.
You have a horse you can ride yourself, and you don't need to lunge it for 20 minutes every day until it's 13 years old. That's a pain in the butt.
Well, and I have
the quietest horse too that you're going to talk about, if it's your first CDI you're going out to, the quietest horse in the world will start to lean towards a 10 trot at its first CDI. I mean, get into the Dixon Oval at Devon, and you don't have to worry about your horse being
energy,
lazy.
Right? Yeah.
The
environment creates a little energy for you.
Well, and I've shared, here that I don't love, the young horse things. Well, I bought this horse, and I bought it for my trainer in Germany. And we went to our first show in Wellington, and he looked at me, and the horse was, he wasn't being naughty, but he was definitely nervous, right? But it's his first show. Of course he's going to be nervous. And Michael said to me, he has a really good character. You're going to be okay. And you know what? When he said that, I was like, you're right. It has a very good character. It's the best thing about my young horse. He is so kind and sweet and really just wants to do what he's told. And he was right. And so everybody calmed down, and we did our thing, and we did a good job. But he was right. That was the best thing he could have said to me, is that horse has a great character. It's the best thing about that horse.
You can rely on it. Yeah. Because it is dangerous for everybody, at a certain point. And we want to have fun too, and I want to have fun training my clients' horses and so on, and my own horses, and so on and so forth. So I take a horse with a little bit better character, and maybe not so flashy in the movement, and then just do the training and see where you go. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's my conclusion about our conversation here.
Well, I think, and the last thing I want to add is I was at dinner with a bunch of people who do have experience with the younger horses and everything, and it was interesting because they were talking about how there's different trainers for different horses, and you can pick between horses that are specializing or trainers who specialize in horses that are a little more difficult, ones that just need a little more confidence. So even people who really have a lot of young horses quite a bit, they even pick and choose between people to start their horses, and it's not always the same person. So that really makes you realize how good you have to be at managing the young horses.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone who's perfect at everything. And some people really like mares a little better. Some people like stallions a little better. Like the horse and rider have to suit in whatever situation so that the horse can do his best job and the trainer can do his best job at what they do. So I think, it's
love it. Just remember your end goal. Yeah, just remember that end goal. Well, Hillary, thank you so much for coming back on the show and doing some young horse questions. If anybody has any more questions you want the three of us to tackle about young horses, we welcome it, as always. So, Hillary, how do our listeners find you online?
So if they are interested in more questions with the young horses that we can talk about more, they can always find me just on Facebook and send me a private message. If they're interested, there's some great articles on starting young horses just informationally for people at dressagetoday.com. And you can easily find that by subject. And then you can just check us out on social media at Facebook and Twitter.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Hillary, and we look forward to next month.
Yes.
Well, Phil, I really enjoyed that discussion that we all had. And we are going to come back with a fantastic interview from Angela Jackson and Rebekah Mingari right after this commercial break from Kentucky Performance Products.
This Nutrition Minute is brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products, the company that simplifies your search for research-proven nutritional supplements at kppusa.com.
The horse that matters to you matters to Kentucky Performance Products. Managing horses can be challenging. Each horse's personality affects the way he behaves and reacts to the world around him. Horses with certain dispositions can be at higher risk for developing health problems than others. High-strung or excitable horses are easily stressed, but so is the timid, quiet warrior. Stressed horses are more likely to develop digestive upsets that lead to colic, diarrhea, and ulcers. Nalox Advanced was specifically developed to support a digestive tract that is under stress. It sustains proper pH levels, reducing the incidence of ulcers and hindgut imbalances, while simultaneously supporting the healing of damaged tissues. Nalox Advanced supports the complete digestion of starches and sugars and sustains populations of beneficial bacteria. Make life a little easier on your sensitive horse and start him on Nalox Advanced today. To learn more about the ingredients in Nalox Advanced, visit Kentucky Performance Products at kppusa.com.
Well, tonight I am so excited for our North American Young Rider Championships wrap-up show to have Angela Jackson and Rebekah Mingari on tonight. Welcome, girls.
Hi, thank you.
Oh, we're so excited. So we're doing sort of a roundtable discussion tonight. Angela Jackson is a friend of mine and a fellow trainer in Kentucky and is well known for her young horse training and young rider training and FEI training. And Rebekah Mingari has done young riders for several years now, gone through the program, and you guys have done it together. And I just love your all story. So I wanted to just start the interview. Rebekah, tell us, how did you find Angela and when? How old were you and how did you start into the program with Angela?
So I was about 13 years old when I started taking clinic lessons with Angela. She came in a couple times a year, and I had my little Morab that I'd get lessons on with her. And then when I was about 14, I got my horse Unico. And from there, I had him for a year at home. And then I transferred to Angela full-time. She took over training as he was about training first level horse. And I wanted to do young riders with him, in the future. So Angela took him on, and I came down to her house whenever possible. I was about 2.5 hours away. So I got to go on long weekends or school breaks or summer vacations. And I essentially lived with her for about 6 years during that time. And it was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot, and it was pretty incredible.
So, Angela, give us your version of when Rebekah came, because she was a mini when she came, right?
Yeah. She kind of stood out when I started giving clinics in the Louisville area, and she had this little Morgan cross that was really cute. And actually, I recall really she was. My experience was at a show we were, and her horse had choked at the show. I'm pretty sure she remembers this, but so she was just devastated and crying, and I was like, oh my for crying out loud, we have to do something. She still had her equitation class to do, and all I had at the show was a 4-year-old giant, about 17 hands, and here was Rebekah, the little peanut. And I approached her father, and I said, I don't know if it's possible, but she can ride my horse in the equitation class. He won't do anything. He's a sweet guy. And so they rushed to the show office, and I think you were 13, Rebekah. Is that correct? I can't remember quite how old you were, but so we rushed to the show office, and they got the entry, they got it all done, and she was allowed to ride. And so I put her on this big 4-year-old warm blood, and she just smiled from one ear to the other, and she was going around the ring, extended trot, and I'm standing on the sideline like, slow down, slow down, slow down. And she had a blast and just grinning from ear to ear, and she won her class. I believe it was with an 80% in equitation, and that's pretty much the first time I knew that we're going to have to do something with this kid. So I think that is my memory of her, where she started to stand out to me.
I love it. So, Angela, tell us a little bit about your program and how you were sort of able to incorporate Rebekah coming. And I mean, that's actually, I think people downplay that, but from a trainer's perspective, when you get a 13-year-old, I mean, it's actually a big commitment also for trainers. So tell us a little bit about that part.
I think it all depends on the kid, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think they have to be a little barn crazy. So as we all know, it takes a lot of work, and Rebekah was just one of those kids. In the summer, she would spend every weekend. And I have to say her parents are very dedicated and made it possible for her. I mean, they would drive her out here 2.5 hours and drive back home, and then drive back out here 2.5 hours, picking her back up and drive her back home. And it takes that kind of commitment. So I'm one of those people, I'm a little direct. So when
you were wonderful.
So when Bill kind of asked me, what would we have to do? My daughter wants to do North American Junior Young Rider Championships. And I said, first we're going to have to get her a horse that can actually do the job. And then we're just going to have to put her on a program and do step by step. And I laid it a little bit out to him, and I said, there are no quick fixes, so this is what you have to do. And if you're willing to take these steps, I'm pretty sure we can get it done.
Can you give us a quick rundown of what those steps are? I think that's hard for parents to sort of know. Like, this is not, like you just said, it's a process. It's going to take a long time. Yeah. It's years to get them there.
Yes, it does take years. And as I am training also young horses, I'm a big believer in the training scale, but I'm also a big believer in correct riding. And I think that it's not necessarily that they have to have a fancy horse in the beginning. It's more important that they learn correct riding on equitation. And I'm a big fan of feeling. When you take lessons with me, I will often ask the girls, is it feeling as good as it looks? What do you feel? I ask them for feedback to me. So sometimes it's deceiving. It's not all about the outline. It's also about a feel. And I think that the kids that I took on also have good feel. And they have to learn that. And I think in the beginning, it's not as clear to them. They only see they want to ride a flying change, or they want to ride in a double bridle. And it's not that important. It's more about the correctness of a straight horse and an even horse and an even seat and an even feeling. And that's what I try to teach in the beginning. And I keep even my, I would say my wording different than once they're more educated. Once they're more educated, we can use all the fancy words like engagement and collection and self-carriage. But in the beginning, that doesn't make any sense to the kids. So I try to not even use those words. I throw them in there and I tell them at the end that's what it will become. But I try to keep it simple so they can understand it first. And it is a process, and each horse and each kid learns at a different pace.
Yes. So, take us through, Rebekah, you started working, then you went to juniors, right? How did that work? I mean, you've gone through the whole program now. Am I correct with that?
Yes. So Angela got Unico up to third level the year before I did juniors, and I got to ride through the test, qualify for regionals towards the end of the year so that I had a feeling of how it would work, so I could be more prepared the next year. And then in 2012 was the first year that I did juniors, and it was a lot of fun. We made it to the freestyle, and so we had a blast. And then the next year we also made it to juniors again, and then at the end of that year we got up to Pre-St. George, and we rode it before regionals kind of thing again, so that I could have a feeling for the following year to do young riders. And then that was the last year with Unico. And then I actually went to Germany the year after. I studied abroad, and I got to ride over there, which was a lot of fun.
Right. And Angela, did you help Rebekah kind of with that process, or how did that work?
Yeah, when she told me that she had an opportunity to go and study abroad, I was finding out how much time she could actually spend in Germany. So we had a discussion to either try out for North American again that year, and or do just forget and just put North American to rest for this 1 year and take the opportunity to actually be a working student. And I was lucky enough to get her in with Tande Ritter, and then also with Klaus Balkenhol, which I think she enjoyed very much and learned a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Take it back, Rebekah. Take it back. Then what happened in your career?
Yeah, so then while I was in Germany, Angela also got me a job with Casey Dunn, who's a breeder in Southern Indiana. She's got incredible horses, and she owns Allure S, who was the mare that Angela rode through the developing horse program, and who I got to ride for young riders this year. So when I came back in January, I got to start working there. And Angela still had Allure, so I got to ride her daughter, Elzarma, who was going to be a 7-year-old. And so I took her to young riders in Colorado at the end of last year, and that was incredible. I mean, she was a 7-year-old, and we had a lot of fun. She ended up getting a silver medal in the freestyle, and it was just a really incredible year. And then this year, I got the opportunity to qualify with both horses, with both Elzarma and Allure. I took over the ride with her so that I could hopefully do U25 with her next year. So we had kind of a prep year. And so I took Allure to New York this year, and she did really awesome too.
Yeah, and Angela, you and Allure have quite an awesome history. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Allure, the horse that Rebekah rode this year, you had her a long time, right?
Yeah, she came to me as a 5-year-old in the fall of a 5-year-old year. Casey Dunn, the owner, she approached me and asked if I could take her through the young horse program, and so she came, and she was a rather tall, skinny horse at the time. Not skinny in that way, but just still a juvenile young horse, typical young horse. And I fell in love with her right away. You could tell that she was certainly something special. And yeah, I did the 6-year-olds, and we did very well. She was reserve champion for the World Young Horse Qualifier at the CDI at Lamplight that year. So she was definitely something I could see right from the start that she was something special. Then we did developing PSG the following year at a 7-year-old. And then I actually went to do a little more studying for myself. I went and worked with Klaus Balkenhof for 3 months, and all my horses kind of had 3 months off. And when I came back, we had a little issue, which was the horse had went to another trainer, and that didn't quite go. They didn't click like her and I clicked.
Sure. So
I had a little repairing to do, but then we came back strong. The following year, she went won the U.S. finals. We were obviously regional champions, and then went to U.S. Finals in Lexington in November, and she was I won freestyle champion. She was horse of the year. She was Prix St. George champion. So yeah, I took her to Gladstone to Festival of Champion, and then took her back the following year to do the Developing Grand Prix, which she graduated out of the whole young horse program. And that was pretty incredible, taking a horse, through the young horse to the developing program, and then graduating at the Grand Prix with her. That was pretty special.
Absolutely. And then, seeing Rebekah rider, what was that like? I mean, you guys have really sort of as a whole team just developed and changed. That's pretty cool.
I'm very thankful for KC to be so supportive. She has a wonderful breeding program out in Corden, Indiana, and it just ended up working out perfectly. That she needed a trainer, and I'm far away, and it's really difficult to send that many horses out to my place. It just made sense that the horses should be staying at her farm, and it's also more cost effective, obviously. And I was just delighted to give Rebekah the ride, and I hope that we can do the U25 next year to add more, well, let's call it little diamonds in her crown.
Sure.
Because
Yes.
Allura is the queen of the barn, and I mean, she just added 2 more FEI medals to the count.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
And so that's obviously next on the list for this incredible horse. And Rebekah is doing a fantastic job. And just to go back to what made me very proud last year was that she took over the 7-year-old and took a 7-year-old to North American. That in my opinion was pretty special. The horse was the youngest horse there. I knew Rebekah had the nerve and the skill to do this when not everybody believed in it, and I reassured everybody that the horse could do it, and that Rebekah could do it, and that they would just be fine. And to even come home with an FEI medal at the end of it with a 7-year-old, I think is testament on how good of a rider she really is and how far along she's come. And it makes me very proud as a trainer.
Oh, it's a fantastic story, and I love it. So for our final question for you both, Rebekah, what would you say as you're going through? I mean, you guys have had an amazing relationship, and I'm sure there's been hard times and great times. And what would you give advice if somebody said, I want to find a trainer, and I'd like to be with this trainer for years and have them develop my career? What would your kind of piece of advice be for the student on that?
I would say, so for Angela, she is a very special person. She will never tell you what you want to hear. She's going to tell you exactly what you need to hear. And she's going to be there for the benefit of you and the horse. Never once have I come to her and asked her a question and worried about if my best interest was at heart, because I know it always is. And so it's been a really special relationship, because I've heard of a lot of trainers and young riders, as the young rider grows up, the trainer sometimes still sees them, as the kid or whatever. But Angela's been a huge supporter of me, and she's been there every step of the way, mentoring me how I need to. And she's watched me grow up, and she, looks at me like a younger professional. I'm not just a little kid anymore, which has been very helpful for me. So I would say to anybody looking for a trainer, find somebody who's well-respected, somebody who, has a good reputation and always puts, your best interest at heart, and somebody who has definitely had the success themselves. Obviously Angela brought Allure all the way up, and, other horses the same. So she can turn me into that kind of rider as well.
Awesome. I love it. So Angela, same question for you, but coming from, the trainer's perspective. I mean, how would you sort of advise a rider and or parents of that relationship and how it's gonna develop over time?
I think it's a little bit of a connection that has to happen. For me, what is most important is that the person is genuine and that they have to be committed to this. This is too hard to just come in. If you're doing it for making the magazine or getting the ribbon, then you're in for a disappointing ride, I think. I think it has to be for the love of the sport, for the love of the horse, and you have to be committed on the long term. The students I have, as well as the clients I have, I think I stress the long-term goal, and that sometimes a short-term goal is not that important. So if a parent would come to me and say, hey, I see what you've done with your students, I need for them to trust me and to trust their trainer, whoever they go to, that it is the long path to success that will make them the trainers and the riders they want to be. It's not necessarily the short, like only looking to the next step. It's looking all the way to the end where you want to go. And they have to understand that there will be up and down. But I would say make sure that you have the long term in mind and not just the next step.
That's fantastic. I love it. Well, ladies, just for our listeners, if they would like to find you online, Angela, how would our listeners find you online?
Well, I don't advertise. I'm not the most social person. So probably via Facebook is an easy way to find me, and or just, send me an email.
Awesome.
That's probably another way to find me. I don't have really advertisements, so I'm sorry.
That's okay. Perfect. Rebekah, how would we find you online and or the horses that you work, and Casey Dunn, who you work for? How would we find you?
So the same thing for me. Probably Facebook would be the best. Our farm, Timbach Farm, also has a Facebook page, and so yeah, that would probably be the best way of getting a hold of me.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time tonight.
Thank you
so much, Reese.
This week's dressage training tip is brought to you by Total Saddle Fit, home of the shoulder relief girth at TotalSaddleFit.com.
Well, for this week's Total Saddle Fit tip of the week, Phil, we've got a good one, don't we?
Yeah, well, we answered a question not too long ago about simple changes, and our listener wrote us back and was talking a little bit about it. So I'm going to just kind of read the message that we got sent to us. She says that she'll be having much more success with the simple changes since we tackled that on the show last week. She found that thinking about the two phases of the canter stride very helpful, and also a bit of permission that we gave her to use her rein aids and the bit a little bit to help the horse get the idea that you can't just run through the transition downwards into the walk. So that was good, I think. And then it took a couple of corrections and a little better timing, and the simple changes have been going a lot better. So there's a follow-up question now for us, Reese. We're going to have to tackle this.
I love it.
She's been having much more success with the simple changes, which is good. And now, how do I apply my new feeling for the two phases in the canter stride in order to get the timing better for the flying changes? And how do we get the timing right and relate to the flying changes from our discussion on simple changes? So do you think you can start tackling that?
Yes, I am happy to start tackling that one. I will just say I'm not 100% sure if this horse knows flying changes. So
it seems like from the message that the horse has done them, and she's using better simple changes to go back at them later on.
Got it. Okay. That gives me a little clearer picture. I was a little confused. So one thing that I would say is going just back to the simple changes. I'm for me, the simple changes have to be almost perfect for flying changes. This is if your horse knows flying changes. Also, if you're teaching flying changes, simple changes can be very important. And one of the things that I would say is make sure not only do you have a crisp half halt toward the downward in the simple change, but make sure you have a crisp upward. Because I think that happens also in the simple changes. Like you have a nice walk and then you canter and then you get more activity. So I think that can become an issue as you go for the flying changes, if the horse knows the flying changes. So I would say as you're riding your upwards, that you're equally as crisp about asking the horse to jump and be active into the upward transition. I would also make sure that the horse is staying through in the upward transition. And I just say that because we talked a lot about the downward transition, but not a lot about the upward transition. And in my mind, flying changes mirror the quality of canter, right? So that's another thing that I think you have to be careful and that we have to mention going toward flying changes is making sure that the horse has a really solid, clear half halt for the activity into the canter. The basic canter, and that the horse is straight, and basically that you've gone through the scale of training. Because if you haven't, going toward flying changes, anything that is wrong in the or not perfect in the scale of training is going to be an issue going to the flying changes. So that's the one thing, Phil, that I would say for setting the groundwork on the flying changes is important. Does that make sense, Phil? You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a good discussion because I was teaching flying changes this week. So one thing that I tell all of my students when we're coming to teaching the flying changes is to really try and do a simple change with only one stride of walk. So the horse the horse and rider get really quick about their aids and really making the horse listen quickly to the half halt, then the change of leg. So, with the horse, moving their new outside leg back to ask for the canter stride. So I think it's a really a tricky timing thing. What do you think about that, Reese?
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's the biggest thing actually with flying changes. It's all about timing, right? If the timing is quality and solid, the flying change is solid, if that makes sense. Now, you also have to think, what are the aids for the horse's flying change? And that's also why people get in trouble, I think, with flying changes. They either have used way too much body language, aka throw their body around. I think especially when you're green learning flying changes or you're teaching flying changes, you have a tendency to want to shake and bake in the saddle is what I say. It's like, just sit still. It really is just a change of your leg aids and your seat aids and riding a half halt. So the change, people make a big deal about the actual flying change. That's actually not the place to make a big deal. Today, I was also teaching someone flying changes. We were working on it. And actually the horse, every time from right to left, would absolutely lean on the rider's left leg. And I said to her, that's the problem. It's not the change. The change is not the problem. The problem's happening before. So it's really important as you go to looking at your flying changes. And that's what I mean about the scale of training. That's the roadmap, right? If you're having trouble with contact or the horse moving off your leg or whatever it is, that's actually where you go and fix. And then you can go back and work on the flying changes. I will say also, flying changes, and we stress this here on the show because this is one of those moments where you need someone that sort of knows what they're doing.
Or even just eyes on the ground.
Or even eyes on the ground.
Figure out what's going on. Right.
Exactly.
So even though I've trained horses to do the flying changes, I almost always do it for like a month, only with somebody watching, because you can't always figure out what's going on and what's the problem.
Yes,
so
it's true. Their legs flying everywhere sometimes, and you're like,
yeah, and you're like, was that okay or is that clean? Every horse has a unique way doing a flying change. And so you really want to be, going on the right track and rewarding the right things and figuring out where, exactly how the legs are going. And even though I ride in the arena with mirrors, you can't always just, focus and see, because you got so much going on. And like you said, lots happening all at once that, you have to have a video or something just to say that was good, reward the horse. That maybe not as clean, go back and do it again, So that's a huge thing, having eyes.
I don't think a video can do it, because the problem is you need the time. You need right then and there. They need a real time response for was the change clean, was the horse for what's happening, are they clean behind, whatever's going on. You got to have somebody. Even professional riders have people, because that is a time that you can get into trouble. And if you teach flying changes wrong, it's very, very hard to retrain them. It can be done, but so yes, that's really important. So those are just some steps. I mean, flying changes, we could do 50 shows, and we did a great show with Lee Tubman about flying changes, and I would just say go back and listen to that show as well, because that was a great one and a great discussion on flying changes. That could also help use some of the resources we have here. But just a quick review, make sure your upwards are good, make sure your downwards are good, and your simple changes. And I loved how Phil said, make sure do it within one stride.
Yeah, do it quickly, right? Do it quickly, because the flying change is even faster than one. If you can't accomplish that, it's not going to work. And again, just to try to answer the specific question of our listener, because I don't think we have tackled that so much. She asked, when in the phase of the collection and the give of the canter do we want to ask for the change? And I'm going to tell you, it's right after you collect the horse. So you take the reins, give the collect, and then you move your leg or a little push with your seat, or right when the horse's hind legs are on the ground, then you're going to pick up the new canter stride. So when if you have no contact, you can't make the change of balance to tell the horse to bring the other lead. I think hopefully that kind of makes sense to you. Does that make sense to you, Reese?
Yeah. It's and I think you said, when you say within the collect, that you're also saying within the half halt, giving the half halt. It's on the phase of the actual take back. Then the release is when the horse steps through. Correct?
Yeah. That's the
cool.
way. So
well, we love it.
It's not always successful, right? Because
again, it's not always successful.
A very quick split second thing, And I think if you have your horse really listening to the half halts, then it can work. But if your horse is blowing through the half halt,
you're done.
It will never work, because
it won't work.
You have to kind of interrupt the rhythm for a half a second or a microsecond to be able to get the quick change of hind legs.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's just a slowness problem most people have, is just trying to think while they do it, and you can't think and do it. You have to just do it.
Yeah. It's just, flying changes are also personal for people too. Everybody teaches them a little different. Everybody has a little bit different feel. But we hope that helps.
I was just going to bring a little antidote that Charlotte Dujardin, her favorite rider in the world, says that Carl Hester can't do ones on Vallegro. Like that's. I mean, I think all the top riders, you can't just switch horses and do flying changes, and even highly trained Grand Prix horses, and it's just, they are very personal between horse and rider.
Yep, they're very, very personal. Isn't that funny? Some of the top rider in the world, top horse, same training system, he still can't get it, and that's not uncommon. So but
interesting. Anyways,
it's really interesting. So, well, we love it as always. We love those Facebook and email shout outs. We try to get to them as much as we can. You can find our show notes and links to today's guests on our website, dressageradio.com. Like us on Facebook, just search Dressage Radio Show. Follow us on Twitter at Horse Radio. My website is maplecrestfarmky.com, and my email is reese@horseradionetwork.com.
I think the best way to find me is usually through Facebook, or my email is philip@horseradionetwork.com. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week. Check out all the other shows on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com.
Everybody, keep your heels down and your shoulders back, and we'll talk to you next week.